essentially to get to Tier 1 class capacity.
Yeah.
And so a map of the demarcs where wholesale capacity is available would be a very useful thing, I think, for the planning of the overall Broadband Council. And then the other task that we think you guys might be willing to take on would be to read, comment, validate, or challenge the right-of-way study that we contracted to have done, to see if the providers are in alignment with it or if there are issues, that providers have with it.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Those are the two thoughts, basically.
Yeah, and going back to the first item, I know that did come up in our last meeting about combining with the policy group. And I don't know if we're ready to jump into that or not, but I'd certainly like to see what the thoughts are around that, because if that makes sense, it certainly seemed to be a lot of synergies that could be attained if we were to link arms with them.
Yeah, exactly, because we were seeing essentially a lot of redundancy basically between what this group is talking about, what the policy group is talking about. So,
well, and my understanding, and I apologize if this is not correct or limited in based on just coming into this, but the policy group will really be working that angle that will essentially free up the funding that would provide anything this particular group is able to do. And so they seem so linked. I don't know why we would want to keep them separate.
That's kind of what we were thinking. So maybe you can lead the discussion with them. But this other two tasks, whether the groups are combined or not, I think are very important things to get done too.
Okay.
Evaluating the right-of-way study and getting a map of the demarc wholesale demarcs in the state. Yeah.
How about the barriers discussion?
Yeah, and there also any regulatory barriers is probably another important thing for this group to be talking about.
Will you be sending out links to where we can find that information?
Yes, especially the right-of-way study.
Yes, please.
Yeah. It may have already been sent, but I think Jeffrey just committed to resending it so that everybody can find it. If you're like me, I'm getting like 150 emails a day, and so I lose track of a few things.
Yeah, this is Rick from Cable One, so I just was wondering. So.
Well, before you do that, if you would like to be on the video screen, you need to sit down at the end of the table.
I don't need to be.
Otherwise, all at this end of the table.
Yeah, we need. We're settling.
Okay, we're going to move down the other end of the table.
All right, so we'll have. So can we take a roll call of who's on the phone?
I know we have Guy Gunther. Who else is on?
Are we neat and pretty?
Rick Bechtel?
Well, I can't do anything with source material.
Okay, Rick.
You can't train good looks, right?
Anyone else besides Guy and Rick? I guess not.
We need help. Rick's not on our list. Rick who?
Hey, how are you?
Rick,
come on down over here.
Rick Beck.
On this end of the table.
Come on down. Man.
Cameron, come on, yeah.
No, I have to multitask.
Anyone else on the phone? Good. We should go around the room maybe and introduce ourselves too.
I'm Craig Jameson, Y-Band.
Craig, welcome.
Galen Updike with State Asset.
Mike Golden with Asset, the Arizona Digital Arizona Project. I can't even say the name.
Emerson Yearwood with Cable One.
And then we have our loyal staff down at the other end of the room, Eric Thomas and Jeff Crane.
Are we well heard, by the way? Can everybody hear us talk?
I didn't hear the first person introduce themselves there in the room.
Craig Jameson, Y-Band. It's a small consulting company.
Y-Band.
Y-Band. No, Y-Band.
Y-Band.
W-I-B-A-M.
Oh, Y-Band. Okay, yeah.
Kind of a play on WiMAX, I guess.
Got it. Okay, good. And I apologize to this group in advance, but there are several topics that hopefully can be addressed today. I was just talking with Guy about them. One of them is we've been having an internal conversation wondering whether or not, especially since this group gets relatively small attendance out of the list of people who say they're going to participate with it, whether or not this group you might want to discuss should be combined with either the strategic planning group or the policy group or some mixture of both. because we have been observing that the topics that are covered in both groups have a lot of overlap and a lot of redundancy. And so I think that's an important thing to cover. The other thing is whether this group stays as a separate group or does in fact merge with one of the other groups that we think would be important work for the group of providers that are involved to provide support to the overall project is to help ASSET create a middle mile demarc map. And I'm kind of defining that as where are the spigots in rural Arizona where wholesale, high-capacity, Tier 1 class broadband capacity is available to tap into.
Somebody just joined us.
Who joined, please?
Ron Scott.
Hi, Ron.
Hi, Ron. And so if we could get some help from the provider group or the providers if they merge with a different group in addressing that, that would, I think, be very useful for us to begin to start to map. That would even help, for instance, in deciding where to place the pilot. You know, where can we tap into Tier 1 class capacity on a wholesale level, or where can the providers tap into that who might choose to support the pilot and then further rollouts. And then the other thing that we think would be valuable for the provider group to do, and we're going to resend it out, is to take the draft right-of-way study that we in ASSET contracted to have done and comment on it, either validate it or challenge any of the assumptions that are made or the data that's in the study, and so that we can finally wrap it up and call it a final document that can be used by the council at large to help make decisions about the various tasks that the council is taking on.
There are some technical considerations in the right-of-way study that validation on some technical stuff would be helpful. Also, as those items that are presented as barriers to build out in the right-of-way study, those we'd like to have at least some validation on, I think.
Yeah, this is Guy. I'd be happy to look into that. That's I've got people on my staff that are expert in that, so definitely.
Yeah, and that input, either validation or challenge, whichever way it goes, is going to be very, very useful, I think, to the council. So, and to ASSET. Then the remaining thing is we just have a brief report too. Galen and I met yesterday with the chairman of the Arizona Corporation Commission and had a very interesting meeting with him. He basically, it was the first time that he'd been exposed to the plan, the draft plan that we've all been working around. And he was very, very supportive of it and felt the entire commission would be supportive of it. And so that was very good news to us. He also believes, as he communicated, that there are no any regulatory barriers around this because it's all broadband. He sees that as outside the purview of regulation, by the commission.
Hey, Mike, what was his take on our chances on the funding side?
He was very positive about that as well. So with no detail, but very positive about supporting it.
It was interesting to hear him talk. They have had a previous discussion about what to do with some of the Universal Service Fund, that particular thing. We won't go into more detail because he didn't go into more detail. I won't even want to speculate. But obviously there was some legislative discussion about that. The other thing we talked about, there were some other legislative things that we...
Well, it was interesting. When we talked about the two highways thing, he said, we've been looking for a long time to see if we couldn't also, you guys are talking about running photons down the highway and classifying that as another component of transportation. We'd like to also classify electrons moving down the highway, in the sense of power lines, I think, under that same kind of broader rubric of using the transportation corridors in the state, for a right-of-way for the delivery of other utility functionality. So
they've been reading the same FCC report that we did.
So he asked us for a copy of the draft legislation for the two highways bill that we've been working on, because they would like to both review it, possibly contribute to it, and possibly extend it. He also felt that there were many legislators, in his personal opinion, who could very strongly and very early get behind the whole broadband model that we basically presented to him. It was very interesting. He got to the little map that I kind of crudely drew, showing 40-mile swaths of reach with microwave from fiber in the roadways. And the very first thing he picked up on was that his second home in one of the little communities,
Forest Lakes.
Forest Lakes, wasn't covered by my green line.
He wanted to make sure it was.
He says, it's going to be very personal when people look at these maps. Are the places in rural Arizona that they want broadband, going to be dealt with by this plan? So, but it was a very, very positive meeting. So, I mean, there's lots of details still to be hammered out, Guy, as you can imagine. But basically, the support, I think, is there. And he also said that the funding thing too. He says, this model that you're talking about for funding, he says, why are you doing a pilot? Let's just get started. And we said, well, there's a lot of people who think that a pilot is probably a good thing. I think that includes us here at Asset too, because there's a lot of things to get right before we commit to any kind of driving a statewide rollout. And so I think testing and validation with most big efforts is usually a good thing to do.
But what was really interesting, he also was very interested in the timelines that we're talking about, and whether or not we can do this before the 2015 deadline that we've set for ourselves, the 2014 deadline that we set for ourselves. I think that we mentioned the school was a 2015 deadline.
2015 for the gigabit to every school, yeah. And
but he said, yeah, and see, that fits very well within their own timelines that they have on the commission.
Right. So anyway, and back to your question, Guy, I think the funding thing is that he's open on two fronts. He's open on possibly repurposing the Arizona Universal Fund to support this project, and I think he's also, the other funds that you guys at CenturyLink have. If you are open to doing it, I think they're going to be open to using some portion of those funds to support this effort as well.
They agreed when you came in and with the 60 million, I think that was the number he even mentioned. We don't know, the plans that you made with it will stay intact, but the more details on that, I think, are subject to some discussion.
Yeah. So that's clearly all conversation yet to be had, really, to get down to the details of that and what might work.
Okay.
Good.
And then, what did you have the opportunity to talk to him about the policy side of this? I know he's probably not nuanced by the fact we're two different groups, but the agenda that they have at least, and his thoughts either way on what they're trying to move forward.
Well, we did talk about the creation of a permit coordination office in DOA, and he said absolutely. He says anything that will speed up and lower the cost for providers is a good thing, and he says, I don't really see that as a regulatory issue, and we certainly, don't have any desire to particularly be the group that's doing that. So, again, I think he was pretty positive about the notion. And we said, we're being very careful to make sure that doesn't emerge or get morphed into being some kind of an additional regulatory body.
We talked about sunsets and everything else, which is a very anti-regulatory body. As a sunset clause on a regulatory body makes it almost impossibly a regulatory body. As we were talking about sunset, of course.
But he acknowledged the power of being able to have some mechanism for coordinating the permitting processes and making them more standard and speedier, basically, and less costly, therefore, to providers. So.
Okay, great.
Do we have representation on the board from the Indian nations at all?
We do.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, we do. We have representation from the Hopi Nation, and they are, it's like anything else. You have to choose carefully. The Hopi Nation is the senior tribal government in Arizona, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but anything that has to do with historical lands and so forth, when you're doing right-of-way, even anywhere in Arizona, the Hopi Nation has right of first refusal as the representative of all the nations in Arizona when you're talking about right-of-way and historical uses. And they have to have a letter, and they get 30 days to ponder whether or not there's a an affront to the tribes in Arizona regarding any right-of-way.
So, okay, because even though, again, you know, I've been working on projects outside of the Hopi with the Navajo.
Right.
So I still got to go through the Hopi?
Okay, it depends on. The Navajo have their own NNTRC now, and we are talking to the Navajos to being a part of this also, by the way. We've asked them to be part of the task force.
What's the actual question, though?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, what question would be going through the Development Council?
Yeah, what's the issue you're concerned about?
Well, again, it's right away up 89 for a private fiber build. Okay, that would help and reflect and extend, you know, broadband up into the northern part of the state,
Yeah.
particularly up into the Page area.
Yeah, but boy, howdy, that's been one of my goals for 6 years.
Oh, it's been my goal since I've been here,
Yeah, right.
Galen. Now, you know, the thing is, you know, we, you know, we're an ISP up there.
Yeah, all we can say is there is a new opening in the conversations we're having with both the Navajos and the Hopi.
Because I'm working with the Land Development Group, the NTUA, and the IT group, and none of them like each other.
You are correct there.
You know, and it's like herding cats. It really is.
Welcome to our world. I
And the
mean.
Hopi-
No, that's what I'm saying. You know,
But
and we can provide a lot of benefit for them to connect their chapters on the west side of the nation that they currently aren't going that far with their stimulus money. You know, they're only going east of Tuba City.
Let me just say, there are ongoing conversations that we at Asset are having with the Navajos. There is a new kind of listening happening amongst them about, they're getting it about several things with regard to fiber crossing their land. One is that they are now for the first time beginning to understand the importance of statewide redundant fiber rings to keep all of the state's networks outside of the metropolitan areas more robust and operational through various kinds of disasters. They're open to being part of those rings and want to have further discussion with us. They get it that we want to get to Page. And so I wouldn't say that it's far from a done deal.
Well, they want to go up to Leachy, you know, up to their marina up there.
Right, but they are really listening and paying attention to what we're doing, and they are participating in the council, and so they're very much aware of what the plans are.
Well, can you include me in those discussions?
Yes, that would be a good thing. NTUA, by the way, does not reach Highway 89.
No, right. I understand that. They stop short of Tuba City, on the east side of Tuba City.
That is correct.
Because they don't own any of the utility poles, you know, in Tuba City or on the west side of the nation.
And APS does reach there, and so...
No, I understand. I've been studying this for a while, Galen.
I appreciate that. Yes. So let me... I have good relationships with the Navajo Nation, all of the players, and have been able to bring about some changes. I was involved in the original fiber layout for NTUA, by the way, in those discussions. So I'm quite familiar with who the players are, some of the tensions that have gone on, and yes, I'd be absolutely...
Well, you know, my problem is everybody tells me the first point of contact is the land office, and I can't get Mr. Honene to call me.
Okay. There's also another committee called the Resource Committee there that we have some negotiations to do with. But NNTRC, by the way, is grappling with taking on some new powers. And they were at one point given the authority to do broadband along the existing right-of-ways, and then it was taken back by the Resource Committee. But then there was an election there, and President Shelley is much more open for doing things, and his chief of staff or policy guy, Desmond Tome, is a good guy. All of this, by the way...
Well, Desmond left, didn't he?
Pardon?
Didn't Desmond leave?
No, he's back. He's now part of the staff.
Oh, did he come back? Okay.
Yeah, so I know him pretty well.
Yeah, I know him and met him and spoke to him. So
anyway, a point that needs to be made is the office in Arizona. As we develop the office of this broadband right-of-way process, we'll have we'll have some real interesting and hopefully some good talking points. And we've already got some joint resolutions going, or some discussion with regard to joint interests with the Navajos.
Yeah, because we actually...
To the city has been a target as well as Page.
Right. And you know, we actually can create a real business case behind this without grant money that would be mutually beneficial for multiple parties, and we're open to discussing joint fiber builds.
Okay, good. Well, maybe you and Galen can take this conversation offline and carry it to a deeper level. And then Guy very kindly volunteered to chair this group, and he asked, what does that imply? And I said, mainly, you know, kind of steer the conversation. and also drive getting a scheduled, you know, mutually agreeable schedule decisions for future meetings among the group. So if you'll do that, Guy, that would be great. And
well, thank you.
I apologize. I have to duck out and go to another meeting. I'll try to be back here towards the tail end of this meeting. So, Guy, take it away.
Well, you know, maybe the easiest way to do this is to kind of go through this list that we talked about in terms of things we're trying to get accomplished. I think the first one was looking at synergies, combining with the policy group. What are the next steps there? Who needs to be involved, and kind of where is that? Let's talk through that one first.
Say again?
The merging this group with the policy group. I mean, what are the next steps? I really don't know what that involves, and who are the players there?
The question is, do we want to? Number one, are there more benefits of having a separate discussion with the members of this group, or are there and as to merging it and maybe making this a subgroup of the policy group, or are the benefits are sufficient benefits available to be keeping this separate group, and including the demerits of having to reschedule and everything?
And Guy, this is Jeff Crane. In making that decision, would it benefit you if I read off who is on that task group, the policy group?
Yeah, and I'm not sure I'd be familiar with them. I guess more of a general question to this group. I mean, are we in alignment and thinking this is a good idea, or what are the next steps to really flesh that out, pros and cons?
Well, let's talk about the benefits of having a separate group versus the shall we say, the demerits of not of having a separate group. What are the benefits of having just providers? Now, there's two purposes, by the way, for this group. One was a provider group to discuss their own barriers, and the other is to also discuss how we get to universal or adoption, or at least availability in the state of Arizona. It started out as a universal availability in the state of Arizona, and it was our feeling as we created this group that it is the providers that are going to do that, not the state of Arizona. And so the biggest question then is, what are the barriers for doing that? We have two that we know of: policies, permitting, right-of-way, et cetera. And we also have return on investment issues that are part and parcel of that. Now, the state can't do certain things, but the state can do some things. For example, in a policy environment, there might even be some tax ramifications if we could, as a policy, that would help on the return on investment in the rural areas if this group thought it was a good idea, as one form of return on investment relief, if you will. But you know, those are all open for discussion, and those are just, you know, ideas that maybe that the group could come up with. It's not our committee; it's the providers group. Now,
so what do the provider members of the group think?
Yeah. Go ahead. Let's see. Okay. So you know, Guy, you're one of the players. I don't. Is Cox here today? Okay. So, what are some thoughts that the group has? Emerson, you have some thoughts as to whether we ought to be separate or together?
I think I agree with the assessment that there is a lot of overlap and that we're discussing some of the same issues.
Yeah, you're on both committees, aren't you?
Right. I don't know if it's, I mean, I haven't attended the strategic group, but I think between from the policy group, I think that it might work.
Okay.
And on the policy group, you've got following people: Stephen Dilstra from Arizona Technology Council, Michael DiMaria from CenturyLink. You've got Bob Burns from Macy's Bennett retired, Michael Bernstein from Simply Bit, Susan Annabelle from Cox, Michael Keeling from Keeling Law Offices, Floyd Roridge from ADOT, Ron Schott, Jim Sims from CenturyLink. So that's kind of the makeup. So.
Yeah, because one of the things that strikes me as I hear you read through that list is that certainly one of the benefits of merging the groups is that we get broader representation. I know, on this committee, I mean, it sounds like just CenturyLink and Cable One represented here, but that list you just read through, there's better representation. Certainly, as we look at some of the other items we're going to talk about, like the statewide middle mile map, or at least the access points, or the DMARC points, I mean, the only way we could really accomplish that is to have full participation, and certainly merging these groups, it just appears to me that we would have better representation across the board.
There may be an advantage also, just for the members who are on both committees today, of just reducing the sheer meeting count you have to attend. That by itself might be an advantage.
Yeah.
And should there be a purpose to actually reform this group, there's nothing that prevents that. If there become issues where it makes sense to have a provider-focused group as opposed to a policy-focused group.
And that could be a subgroup of the policy group, easily done, no question.
I mean, these are all volunteer groups, so they
Right.
can kind of come and go as needed. They weren't intended to be, standing committees forever.
For example, education is finishing their work up within the next 2 months, and then their input will go into the strategic plan, and hopefully at that point it'll be maintenance by the larger group, by the council, will be then forwarding those information. These task groups and committees are to do the detailed filigree type stuff that a large 21-member council really just can't do.
Okay, well, I'm not trying to beg the question, but I'm not hearing a groundswell of support in the moment for staying autonomous. I'm hearing the collapsing.
Who else are members of this group right now?
Yeah, not everybody's here, and that's fair. And maybe a guy.
Well, this group, additional members would be Michael Bernstein, Simply Bit, Greg Bryan from the city of Tucson, Joan Clark, Arizona State Library, Bradley Fetter, Simply Bit, Dennis Fennessy from Deloitte. We've got guys,
Michael Stahl?
Let's see. No, he's on the other one. He's on the policy.
No, okay.
Nolan Straub, Jim Sims from CenturyLink, Ron Schott.
This group?
And this group. John Reuter from Town of Tucson, he's a council member. And then Mala from the Arizona State Library. Duke from Strategic Technology Communications.
Yeah, there is
overlap by company, if not person.
Yeah, lots of overlap. So, again, our purpose for outlining this group was to discuss barriers specific to providers and also perhaps amelioration of those barriers and fairly, and get into some of the details as to what could help, especially in the area of return on investment issues that are state related or government related, and also the right-of-way issues and then the mapping issues also. So, and sometimes this group could get into the benefit of having a separate group, we could get into more detail as to technology and technical terms and so forth that may not be known by the policy group. But a subgroup could take care of that also.
So it sounds like, yeah, I'm hearing more support for this than against. So then I guess the next step is, I guess, to schedule a joint meeting, to bring everybody together and work through a charter of sorts that would align our objectives and what we're trying to accomplish.
The next meeting for the policy group is scheduled for December 15th, which is a Thursday at 10 o'clock or 10:30 a.m.
How about we join forces and invite ourselves to that meeting?
And we have some, as I recall, there were two chores that group was tasked with. One was to come up with some definitions and also take a long look at the legislation that we had proposed, the draft legislation that was, think of it as a straw man right now.
Well, and to be clear, it's policy and right-of-way.
Policy and right-of-way, yeah. So,
Guy?
Yeah.
Can I ask you to at least shoot Mike Keeling an email? Because Mike is kind of the leader of that group, and let them know that you may be descending with additional people on that meeting, just so he's aware of it. We'll let him know.
Could you please send me Mike's contact information?
Sure. I think that's more a matter of protocol. We'll certainly let him know as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then I guess, we should then, after I have that opportunity to talk to Mike, and assuming they're comfortable with us bringing other people, then I'll send out a note to this distribution with the logistics so that everyone who would have, otherwise been on this meeting has the opportunity to attend that if Mike's comfortable with that.
It makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
Okay. And then, somebody mentioned the right-of-way. So there already is a common to-do that we're both working on. It sounds like they've got a to-do on the right-of-way. We were just asked to comment and make suggestions. That seems like just one right off the bat, a quick win we could do together.
Well, and they are looking at both sides of the right-of-way issue, from the provider side as well as the jurisdictional side, as to how they handle it.
Okay.
City of Tempe spoke up in that meeting, for example.
And just an item on that, did someone commit to sending out the right-of-way information to this group?
Yes, I'll send it out to you.
the right-of-way study?
The one that we're being asked to read and comment on. Yes, I guess it was the study.
This is Jeff. I'll send that to you guys.
Are there other members of this group that ought to receive that also?
No, it's going to the whole group.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest to this whole group. Because what would be nice is if we could send that out right away with the ask that people look at it and read it ahead of this December meeting of the policy group. That way we can show up and have a little bit richer conversation around that.
Okay.
I would say we will all check with Mike, but I would say we would also send out the draft legislation so they don't walk in cold as to what that group is already in the middle of discussing.
Okay, good.
Now, one of the things that Mike Golden indicated at the beginning of this meeting was the need for in our mapping effort, or at least maybe not as a public presentation of our maps, but in the background, the data part of our map, where we're discussing, especially where the pilots might go. Is it possible that we could, in fact, have these points of presence, the COs, the termination points for the fiber, that some of that is public information that's with the FCC, for example, but some of it's not. The COs, I think, are pretty much part of the FCC information that's submitted on the 477. But what does this group think? I mean, we have 4 people on the line right now, and we have 2 big companies that are part of this group right now. what are some barriers for us? What would be some limitations that you think would be appropriate or needful as that information is provided to the committee or to the council as part of our deliberative basis?
Galen, this is Guy. I'll just jump in. I did have a chance to socialize that with some of our policy folks, and I think the concern, as you indicated, on the pieces of information that are not part of the public domain, and the question back to you or the asset team: would there be a state or someone paid for by the state that could maintain confidentiality and essentially assemble this information and make it such that it's generic and that you cannot distinguish individual company information, information that would be tied to a specific company? I don't know if that's something that you've done in the past. It probably have, but that was one of the things that I was asked.
One of the things we do in our mapping is we aggregate everything up to a census block, by the way. Okay, and the other thing we do as part of our NDA agreements is we take names off of any public presentation of that kind of information, and we always, if you designate as something as confidential, it remains confidential and will not be available to be seen in a public way in any of the mapping that we do. That is released to the public, and our maps they always show aggregated data. They never show individual data.
Okay. And the state would maintain all submissions and maintain the confidentiality that would be required around some of that information.
That is correct.
Okay.
Does there need to be agreement on that as opposed to just?
It's already part of the NDA agreement.
Okay.
If it's marked as confidential.
I just want to make sure that there's a formal channel so we don't get somebody that do a FOIA.
Right. Yeah. FOIAs would be, and Eric brings up a good point. What do you do about FOIAs? Well, if it's marked confidential, our NDA agreements are honored, and they do set the standard for what is FOIAble. Okay. So I think that. Again, this is true in all contracts. If it's marked confidential, it's not FOIAble.
That's
by agreement.
It just can't be. That's just a channel it needs to come to.
Right. Now, the courts can always disagree with that if it goes through a court process as to what's FOIAble or not FOIAble. Then we're at the mercy of whatever the courts finally decide. But we will take the confidential side every time. Yeah. Ultimately, I think that this information, by the way, typically has a time life of its own. In other words, it becomes stale fairly within some reasonable time limits, and so it's especially as footprints expand and so forth, it becomes the life of the product or the life of the information ends. I think. The valued life of the information ends. So the answer that was a long answer to a short question. The answer is yes, it would remain confidential.
Okay, and the second question I have, Rick and Emerson can jump in, Cable One, but what about reaching out to other providers? I mean, there's just two of us on the phone. How do we do that? It seems like there are probably other members that are part of this committee, just aren't here today, probably have been in the past. How do we reach out to them and get their input on this?
I think there's two. Obviously, we reach out in our mailings. I think that if the vendors themselves will reach out amongst themselves, I think that will add a second layer, a very interesting layer too.
But specific to the other people on this committee, nobody else doing that right now. Guy, if you will draft something, we will redistribute it to the people on this group. You probably actually have it by virtue of having received an email from Jeff. You implicitly have all those addresses.
Okay.
Hey, I would suggest, as far as other service providers reaching out, particularly cable operators, reaching out to Susan at the Arizona Cable Association.
Yeah, we know Susan very well.
So if you want more input or feedback for the other cable operators within the state, particularly now Suddenlink, that just taken over all the systems from NPG in various parts of the state, she would have, significant input into that.
That's a good idea. Galen, is that a contact you can make?
NPG, yeah. Now, what's their new name?
No, I meant, I think the suggestion was to talk to Susan.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, the new company is called Suddenlink.
Yeah, okay. And, what would be an interesting thing is if maybe Emerson or if you, Rick, would give her a heads up that we're going to be contacting her and saying this is something you'd like us to do.
Oh, I think she'd be more than happy to hear from you, Galen.
Okay, I know Susan very well.
Well, then, yeah, it probably wouldn't be a surprise. So.
Okay, Susan Bittersmith. She's the president of the cable organization. How many cable companies are there in Arizona? About 12?
Jeez. I don't know. Well, there's many small ones, but I would say there's 10. Like if we look at UMass, Time Warner, and now NPG has all the former. Suddenlink has all the former NPG properties. You still have VTX, Valley Telecom.
Mediacom down in Tucson area.
What?
Mediacom, they used to be.
Well, Mediacom only has 3 systems. One's, of course, their big one's in Apache Junction, and then they have Nogales and Ajo.
Okay.
They're the only 3 systems they have.
All right. So that's there's just a handful of them. That's true. Maybe 10. Looks like.
And of course Cox, even in the smaller areas down in Wilcox, and of course Douglas and those areas.
Cox is involved, by the way.
Yeah, no, I know, with Michael. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Michael and I talk a lot. So.
Okay, good.
So,
okay, good.
who else on the? Anybody else?
Comcast here in Tucson.
That's correct.
Oh yeah, they're up in the Oro Valley. They're in the north part of the county. Yep.
Are there any in northern Arizona besides MPG and cable?
There may be some small ones.
I know Eagle West.
Emerson, do you know of anybody up north?
No, I'm not aware of other players. My question would be: is there any obligation or any desire to only include operators that are currently operating in the state? I mean, is there any possibility that any of these projects would eventually be open to other companies that that are established up in other states?
Good question. We are not planning to be a regulatory body at all. We're just providing information and best practices. That's our purpose. And what happens in the competitive industry is completely outside of our interest. I think that this is a voluntary group, and you self-appoint your existence on this committee or no, or as part of the larger group if we're going to just become a subgroup to the policy group. But again, we're not going to reach out to anybody outside of Arizona. That's for sure. That's a good question, though, Emerson.
Yeah, and then you have Indian cable operations like NTUA and Scutui and people such as that.
Do they have cable operations too?
Who, Scutui?
I didn't know they had cable.
Well, they have telecom. They have their private their CLEC, which is Triplet Mountain, and then of course Scutui runs the cable operation on the reservations.
Right. Yeah, that's just for their TV system.
Right, but again, we're back to right-of-way. Try to get a right-of-way between Globe and Safford.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
I understand. And that's one of the issues that we're also chatting about. At one time, Scutuli and I had some really long conversations about that very thing, especially
yeah. Tell me about it.
Especially as they were doing their big big grant application. Which
Yeah,
is
and
widely. Okay. So,
yeah, we used to talk.
now, Mr. James is gone now, I think, is he not?
Yeah, Vernon's gone, and Shirley Ortiz
Okay.
is running.
I do not know Shirley.
Yeah, but Gary's the general manager.
Yeah, I know Gary.
Well, I guess if the question is about outreach to other companies, including in the state or out of the state, maybe the best thing we can do is just like I would think that if we just maintain a website, and as you say, have people inform themselves and appoint themselves whenever they're interested, then that's about all I think we're obligated to do.
Again, this committee is self-appointed.
Right.
The interest in this committee and any new adjunct of this committee, whether it be part of the policy or stays here, and it sounds like we're moving as maybe potentially a subgroup as the policy.
And other than the draft legislation itself, everything that we've talked about is on the website.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing, it's all open stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
The only reason we have to put the draft legislation up is it's still draft, and we don't want too many copies floating around.
Now, we are interested in mapping the technical resources, the strategic resources at least, of the cable operations. Now, most times the cable operations are, if you build fiber, it's for yourself, and it's owned and run and operated, and nobody else is on it. We also are interested in having the cable operators, though, help be part of the sharing of any. That's why we're building we're envisioning at least having multiple ducts, so that anybody who wants to put fiber through these right-of-way ducts that we are setting aside can.
Sure.
And so having the permitting already done along these state and county and local highways, as far as down as we can reach, is going to be a substantial savings, I think, for most operators of any kind of telecommunication or any broadband environment. And so we want to benefit all, and that's all that the state of Arizona taxpayers have, by the way, is to lend to this operation, is the opportunity for right-of-way. Now, we've talked about at length the subset of tribal right-of-way, and that is an issue that has to be worked out. Everybody knows that. And it turns out that state lands or state highways that go across tribal lands have some jurisdictional situations there. Typically they have single purpose right-of-way across tribal lands, but those can be negotiated. And they're willing to negotiate those, it appears, in the 3 or 4 instances we talked about. So it's just a matter of how you approach the tribes themselves, I think. And we're all interested in that because we're all belong to the same state of Arizona, and we're all citizens of the state of Arizona. Beyond the question I just asked, the barriers to release the information, are there limits to the type of information, or maybe I ask this way, what are the limits to the type of information that might be forthcoming from the providers with regard to this mapping information? We set a kind of a stage that it would remain, shall we say, protected. But what would be the limits of what we could expect?
I'm trying to remember during the mapping effort, and I know that Mike Keeling was heavily involved with that. The mapping was done, I believe, just to the census plots.
That is correct.
Right. So. And
that's where residential, but there is a subset of information, the middle mile information, which has become very, very important for us to understand, especially for these pilots, and for growth generally.
So, Rick, can you answer that question? I mean, is there anything that we have in terms of middle mile that isn't public knowledge or already mapped?
No, I mean, Eric has been doing our maps, of course, and he's been submitting them, and by census blocks and everything else according to the requirements. But I think we've submitted everything we have.
I don't think we've seen very much middle mile.
I don't think that was requested.
I don't think it was requested. I think we asked in our NDA mapping effort, we've asked for areas of coverage by residents.
Well, most of our middle mile is leased by other providers.
Is it leased from or leased by?
Leased from.
Okay. That's interesting.
Makes sense.
You know, I mean, we're not going to build 300 miles of fiber. You know, again, there's going to be a cost-benefit analysis there.
The fundamental drawback is there is not a published, reliable middle mile map current within Arizona. You know, there are bits and pieces that people have, but there really isn't a middle mile map that's shareable at this moment. And some we've got because Galen's knowledge allowed us to put it on a map. But it's really not, I guess, definitive, authoritative, if you will, from the people who actually own the middle mile.
Yeah, I mean, we have some middle mile, if you want to call it that, of our own fiber example between, you know, like Safford and Thacker, okay, or Globe, Miami, you know, or, you know, Winslow, Holbrook, Show Low. But as far as interconnecting all of our systems together, our primary service provider is CenturyLink.
Okay, and by the way, in any of our mapping, we're never going to show the exact route. We're only going to show a representation.
No, I understand.
Activity.
Yeah.
We'll be within 5 miles, maybe, of
No, I'm just saying it's already, you know, part of other providers' information.
Okay, so one of the things that might be helpful for us to understand then is who you're leasing your middle mile from as a cable provider. And
well, in the state, I said our primary is you know, Quest CenturyLink.
Okay. One of the other things that we're interested in is the capacity of the termination points. And that will give us...
Most of those are 10 gig.
Okay, wow. Okay. Rick, you and I, be okay, Emerson, if we sat down with Rick and had a private conversation here?
Well, I brought him in.
Okay, good. And
you have my information, Galen. Just give me a call or send me an invite, and we'll...
I've got your information now. Thank you.
So, okay.
Okay, so, Guy, one of the issues that we had talked about last week as we left the room was also getting a better understanding of what your mapping information was. And the limitations that we might expect there from you, I guess, are still up for discussion, but on a general basis, again, if given the confidentiality issue being agreed upon, as far as not being revealed beyond a census block piece of information, what might we expect from CenturyLink?
Well, Galen, the kind of the clarifications you've made on this call today certainly have helped. And what I'll be able to do now is give you a definitive answer on that. You know, before when we left last week was a little bit more open-ended, and I think the request now as it stands, as well as the ability to aggregate this, particularly if we're looking at what someone characterizes the spigots, or you know, those abilities to access it from a wholesale perspective. I'm confident we'll be able to get something. I just need to now finalize that based on what I learned today.
Yeah. See, we are in process of getting L3s and also AT&T's information. We've had that for a while. What we don't have is their termination points, but we do know where the general mapping of where their fiber is, and they're the two major wholesalers in the state.
Well, you know, Galen, you know, any cable operator, our primary termination point is going to be our system locations.
Right. Okay.
Okay. That's just, you know, if we connect the systems, that's where we terminate into the systems.
Okay.
You know, into our head end, or, you know,
right.
CO locations.
And the CO locations are pretty much public information, are they not?
Well, yeah, it's where typically where our offices are.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, by the way, yeah.
That's where you drive around and see the building.
Yeah. Okay.
They've got the big towers and antennas on them.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
That's what those things are, right? Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Is there anything else? Is there anything else, Guy? No. Good.
No. So let me. I'll be able to go back and probably get something pulled together now.
Okay. So 2 tasks from this that we have. Go ahead, Craig. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that. I don't represent a provider. I don't work for the state. I'm a pure volunteer.
Thank you.
This is a task group. We need specific tasks, and I think one of the things that gets more involvement by the providers is that name some pilots. Where do we want to go? What do we want to light up? What schools? What places on the map do you want to light up? Now, you don't necessarily have to know everybody's map. I did this for years as a cellular carrier. I would go to the carriers and say, this is the capacity I need at this point, and they would come back to me and they'd tell me whether they could do it or not, or whether they could provide it or not, or what it was going to cost me to get it. You know what I mean? So I think that'll light up the providers and get them motivated. If all of a sudden they see you're rolling, and you've got some specific things you want to do, some specific, you need your pilot. You really need to get that pilot launched, because that's going to really...
Let me give you some feedback on the other groups. We have had the distinction or dubious pleasure of participating in all the groups, and we've asked education, healthcare, and economic development to identify what they were looking for out of a pilot, what they expect to achieve, and what areas of the state would make sense to meet the two highways for the price of one criteria within a confined area, i.e. a pilot. They are in the process of putting that together right now as to what their hopes and dreams are out of a pilot and then where they would go. Once we have those, there'll be a group consolidated to pull together, all right, of those 3, we're only really going to one good-sized pilot, maybe 3 or 4 locations, but one physical, one geographic location. What makes most sense, what's most doable within the time frame, which is still to be determined. So you're absolutely right on that we've got to get some energy around where we go, and those 3 task groups are still in the process.
I think that would fill up this room. I mean, if all of a sudden all the providers are seeing,
business,
there's motion.
Absolutely.
Decisions are being made.
We really hope so.
All of a sudden.
Well, and one of the biggest interests from all the providers is business-driven opportunities.
Right. Now, the other thing about the pilot, it sounds great what they're doing. The other thing I would look at, just from a standpoint of building these networks, I think you're talking about initially point-to-point, because you can't necessarily get fiber to all these locations initially. At least that's...
Well, yeah, that's why we're going down to 1 or 2.
One of the things, another criteria would be, what's the low-hanging fruit?
Right.
What's the easiest to accomplish the fastest? And I'm sure there's a lot of providers out there that have ambitions on certain markets, and they'd be very interested in telling you what they're really interested in doing.
Well, the pilot needs to meet multiple needs. It's redundant. Has multiple needs. One of it is the physical aspect that is related to the grant that we are actually funded for, and that is it does need to be rural. And it really does need to be, and by our definition, we've said one of the criteria is to how to prove or disprove the concept of 2 highways for the price of 1. So we do believe there's going to be some digging and some laying of conduit in order to meet the needs, and then to working with a provider to actually pull fiber through those conduits. So this is not we're not looking at this as a 3-month quick, fly in, make it happen, then go away. We know it's going to take some time. But part of it is to demonstrate that this is repeatable. If all we were to go into this, to go into an urban setting, show that there's a value in broadband and then leave, we already know that. We've got to be able to prove that we can actually fund stuff that will actually work in rural areas.
And that we can measure success and growth from economic development because of it.
So
we have a set of baseline.
But the objective of all three of those groups, the education, health, and the economic development, those are very different in terms of their focus, but we're really trying to at least have one demonstrated win out of each one measurable win, so that we can say this is what we expect to see elsewhere, because that's the only way we're going to get funding for the middle mile out of other quarters,
Right.
whether it be out of the legislature, whether it be out of some sort of additional grant funding, whether it be out of private funding. We don't know right now.
And one of the things we need to understand as we both work for a pilot and as we take a look at a larger view of the state, sometimes we have fiber down a road, but the head end of that fiber is OC3. Okay, so we don't have anything bigger than an OC3 going down that fiber. I mean, even though the capacity is much higher, 155 megs is all we got going down that fiber. And so we need to know the capacities and what the issues are, so that we can in fact know what, as we extend fiber to places where it doesn't exist right now, which there's probably 70 communities in the state that don't have fiber to it right now. Yeah.
But your point is well taken, that once we can demonstrate even the direction of success, it doesn't have to be bottom line. Well, it has to be bottom line, but I mean that we're going to be successful. I think you will see some newfound interest in this group, or at least of the members of this group, maybe not necessarily in the group.
Well, they start showing up because it's their interest at that point in time.
Well, the other thing that actually the other group, the right-of-way, policy right-of-way group, one of their hopeful charges is to how can they streamline the right-of-way efforts. And because right now it's very, well, one thing we heard loud and clear is the multiple jurisdictions, the different time frames, the overlapping rules and regs, the different levels of understanding at the local level and at the intervener level. I don't even know what to call those guys.
Yeah.
People don't have a common understanding, and if we can do nothing more than to help frame that, so that Tempe does it the same way. They're a bad example. So that Tusayan does it the same way that Prescott Valley does, and they have similar criteria. We will have had a huge win for the providers, because now that at least it's a common set of rules that they can play by. We don't want to create the rules, but we would certainly like to bring forward best practices that those folks could adopt.
I'd almost say, talking about the two different committees, you almost need two committees, one looking at the very short term, launching pilots,
right,
and one of them that's more looking, because you're not going to solve the whole state anytime soon. That's going to take a longer effort. But I think what you learn in the pilot is going to certainly help you an awful lot when you go develop the state plan.
We haven't actually talked about how to structure the management of the pilot. That's actually on our plate to decide. That has not been done yet. But you're right. There's probably, I don't know whether to call it a committee or a task group. I don't know what to call it. But there needs to be some group of people that are managing the pilot. And right now we have not put that together.
And the pilot, we want the pilot to be there so we can solve barriers.
Yeah.
I mean, there have to be some barriers.
You think?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
To overcome so that we can show that. It's been my goal for a long time to make the permitting and the right-of-way process, in fact, a process rather than an event. Because we have, every time there's a build out there right now, those are typically events in the life of the providers. And
a common process. I mean,
a common process.
So that everybody's doing it approximately, not the same way.
And we can even, as this process extends across the state, and as we have, as the Department of Transportation, who has the bulk of the right-of-way in their stewardship, as they define on a line on a map that says this is set aside for broadband right-of-way, that's the process that we'd like to have the entire state go through, so that it's no longer an event for a provider to have to go out and define their own right-of-way, that it's already existing, including along even county roads, or even county. One of the things you have to have is accessibility for the entire conduit. And so we want that to be a process in place that the providers no longer have to make it an event for themselves, other than some simple steps, qualification steps, et cetera.
To your question, do you think that, at least in the short term, the collapsing of the two interests basically what it boils down to is additional provider interest on the policy right-of-way committee? I mean, that's really what we're talking about shifting. Yeah. Is that going to meet the short-term need toward working on policy? Because there's two sets of short-term needs. One is the filer itself, and the other, the ongoing development of the right-of-way. As much as we'd like to think that's going to be rapid, it's probably not, just because you're dealing with a lot of jurisdictions. And I'm guessing it's going to take a lot of approvals of a whole bunch of people throughout the state. So what can we do to at least put forward good ideas? And that may be the best group to be doing that sort of thing. I don't know.
Well, I think you could use all the help you can get from for both efforts, really, whether you merge them or you don't. It'd be great to have cross-ownership, because who better knows how to build and maintain networks than the providers?
Just for the benefit of this group, just so you'll know, the Education Committee, and we still have yet to hear from Health, and we have to hear from the Economic Development Group also, but the Education Group came up with about 9 potential areas, clusters in the state. And now we're winnowing those down to some 2 or 3 that have the highest. We're actually doing a rubric to understand which ones have the highest potential from the members inside the Education Committee. Now, their criteria, by the way, includes, is the area E-ratable? Is there local leadership? Are there educational benefits going to come from those groups? Is there a strong champion inside of those education groups to be the driver in that community or those communities to really make the emotional change? It has to be so that the ones who are the governmental entities that control right-of-way, if you will, are going to hear from some champions. And so all of these things are kind of like dominoes that you want to have from different strings of dominoes that have to fall.
Well, one of the other questions, in the back of my mind, you probably already addressed it, but once you get fiber to a school or medical clinic or wherever it's going, what happens then? Is the state going to help build the network for the school, inside the school?
Well, the nice thing about the new rules with regard to E-rate is that as long as, if it's a priority 1, and these are priority 1, there is a subsidy that's available to help build that and build that to a head end. Now, we have a problem in the E-rate structure that what is it, number 6, rule, help me out there, Rick, the 6th order.
I'm sorry, Galen?
Yes.
Your question again?
I was searching for the proper name of the FCC ruling that came up. The 6th order from the FCC has really changed the way fiber is looked at going to a school. They've made it more...
Yeah, it recently changed. Previously, dark fiber was an ineligible service.
Right.
And now there are some cases where dark fiber can be eligible for subsidy. But it has to meet certain criteria as far as how it's lit and how it's maintained.
And they also changed the ruling as to who can use the benefit of that broadband that's being provided to the school.
Well, before it previously had to be over a common right-of-way and be not a private network that could be shared, have the ability to be shared by other services, thus the cost-saving benefit of having a lit managed service prior to having approval for dark fiber.
Right. And so it loosened up the rules, and it made it more...
Emerson knows these very well, too.
I'm sorry.
Back on your shoulders.
Sorry, Emerson.
Yeah, Emerson's our regulatory and governmental counsel. So.
But, it's one thing to read it, there's nothing to actually implement it, which is what Rick does. So, but no, we have... We're aware of the changes in E-rates, but I'm not really sure that I don't see those as a barrier to the type of things that we're trying to talk about.
It just became one of the criteria because some of the things that we wanted to do was have these more subsidized by, you know, the school. So the schools would go for it and be behind it because they are going to have to put up the 10% of whatever's going to be done.
Well, under E-rate, they actually have to provide the technology plan.
Right.
So
Not
they
anymore,
drive.
just for broadband. Priority one, they don't have to provide a technology plan anymore.
Okay.
But prior to they do, and that's usually part of it.
To your question about...
Well, priority 2 is internal connections.
Right.
Okay.
I understand that.
But the objective of the grant is to help bring the middle mile to the community, and also a community anchor, and then to look to the providers to produce the final mile thing, and that's where our hand-up takes place. We're willing to facilitate it. We cannot fund it. We can't be part of it.
Right.
Well, I guess in a school, what happens in a school when you deliver the fiber to the school? How do I distribute it within the school? And where do the PCs come from? Do we have PCs?
Well, that doesn't come out of this grant. There are other grants for that purpose.
So there is.
That's all classified under internal connections.
Right.
Okay.
It's just that part of this now is frankly a grant jurisdictional issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can plan, but we can't actually do bricks and mortar and all.
Well, I think
we got to do all this.
the only thing that occurs to me is we'd look pretty dumb if we delivered fiber.
It was really fast fiber with nothing to
Some
plug it
great
into.
fiber
Yeah.
and capacity, and all of a sudden the school says, well, you know.
Well, and see, that's the other part of the criteria is are they ready to move in an application?
Oh, yeah.
And so the education community is telling us which areas have really advanced their needs and they've got their technical plan in place, pretty much. And so we're not going to choose somebody that's not ready.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the criteria that we're using for who's ready in the state educationally to receive this. And we picked out 8 or 9 sites.
Well, that'll get them moving too. All the schools will be sitting there going, oh, we better get busy here.
Well, and
if we want to get, you know, broadband.
E-rate itself has got cycle time to it. I mean, at certain times of year, they can apply.
By the way, the E-rate cycle time is 18 months from the time you sign the contract or to get the approval is you're not going to get any money for at least at 18 months out.
18 months?
18 months.
Hey, gang, this is Guy. I'm going to have to drop today. I apologize. But, Galen, and others, I took the note. I got from Jeff the contact information for Mike. Jeff, thanks for sending that. I've got some work to do on my side just to vet our information for this map, which I'll do this week. And then someone's going to be sending around, and Jeff, you may have already done so, the right-of-way study for us to review.
Okay. Guy, I sent that to you already, and it looks like you have not got it, because I sent that before I sent Mike Healing's contact information.
Okay. I'll keep a lookout for it. It may have come in.
Okay, it's a large file, so if you do not get it, let me know and I'll resend it.
I talked to your local provider about taking file sizes.
By the way, there was one other task that we had originally talked about for this task group, and that was for this task group to come up with 6 or 7 potential pilot sites where we could, in fact, from a provider point of view, where it might be helpful to have, from your point of view, some things where what are some next steps that you'd like to see? I think, and we had that, it was one of the tasks for the provider group to tell us who the next steps are, where some potential sites are. I thought we had that as one of the tasks.
I don't remember that, but we might have.
There might have been policy.
That sounds policy.
Policy?
Yeah. Forgive us, guys. We're running through 6 of these.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, but it would be nice to hear from the providers as to where you'd like to extend your footprint.
Yeah. I mean
that's a logical thing. That's how we're going to.
They all have appetite to. They're looking at markets out there. Where's the, money to be made?
That's a two-edged sword, by the way. We understand.
That might have been this conversation, Galen, because we were talking about science a lot.
Right.
During that conversation, so maybe it was.
I thought that was one of the groups. Yeah, it was one of the group's goals. So between now and the 15th, if we could hear from, and maybe we'll contact Simply Bits and some of the others before we fold this in, if we do, into the other group. If we could hear from, and how we hear that, by the way, is again, it's a two-edged sword. Because we do know that those are some confidential things that your plans might be So if you could couch that discovery for us, or that discussion for us in general terms, where you think it might be possible to to have a pilot in the communities here, extending into the rural areas, we're interested in hearing that.
So some of the challenges, and it's so much is going on in parallel, we probably need to identify ourselves what our expectations of the provider partner will be. Because, I mean, right now, it's a pretty picture on that diagram, but until we really identify what that says, I mean, because that's going to have an awful lot of way that pilot gets driven.
By the way, I just, let me couch that particular assignment with this. We have the highest respect for the providers in the state. The providers are the only way we're going to extend, have a ubiquitous available broadband in the state of Arizona. And we understand that it's going to be done by extending footprints to the various areas of the state. Beyond that, I mean, and we want to make sure the policies work for those areas. So if you have barriers to a particular project you're looking at and need things, that's what we wanted to hear. But we also know there's some competitive issues in that, and so it makes it a two-edged sword.
Well, one of the things
to ask you,
I might contribute, having done tons of financial plans on rural cellular, is you'll discover very quickly that in a lot of markets, and I think it works for broadband too, is it won't support two providers. It won't support two providers. Now, two providers might show up, three might show up. They're all going to get hungry and lose interest.
Right, there's not, ROI is just not.
So I don't know how you deal with that, but, I think I can see down the road there's going to be feelings hurt, toes are going to get stepped on. There's going to be disagreements. How you resolve them, I'm not quite sure. But I think the providers have to step up and say, what do you want to do? And where do you want to do it?
I just said. There is a process that we've had a couple pilots already in the state, where as there is public, shall we say, some public ownership of some certain things because of a grant or something like that, where we can actually reach out and have either a quote process or a RFP process in place to choose the winner in a particular area that is fair and level, which is what I think most providers are willing to go to a level playing field in their competition. I think they understand that very well. And so it's not going to be, we're going to step on as few toes as possible with regard to these types of situations.
I think we need to know, I think in fairness to the providers, because to say of the entire state, where would you most like to see the pilot to meet your service needs, we probably got to hear from the end users before we hear from the providers. That would be my sequencing.
Well, that's what they're,
I think you got to work both at the same time.
Yeah.
These type of projects you got to be working on as much.
It's constantly doing that.
Everything has to move forward in parallel, or you won't. You're going because if you get a snag over here, it's going to stop a lot of your activity. So the way you build large networks is you just move out in several directions at once and try and get as much done as you can.
Yeah.
That's
Guy in getting here.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Guy.
You bet. I'll plan on sending my updates through to Jeff, and Jeff, you can help me with logistics.
Absolutely. And if there's some private discussion, please feel free to call me or Mike Golden or anybody on this if you have private.
Preferably the two of you, but get involved at that level.
Yeah.
You got it. Thank you.
Myself.
Okay.
Talk privately as we discuss these things.
Thank you.
You guys, I'm presuming that Mike Keeling will open up people to attend that meeting. I don't think that'll be a problem, but it will. You'll hear back. Probably Jeff will send the announcement about the meeting.
Yes. Yeah. I'm waiting. What I asked Guy to do is contact Mike Keeling first, and then once they have the discussion and everything's agreed upon, I'll inform both the groups.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll do it that way.
Anything else for the good of the cause today?
Well, I just want to thank everybody, especially these NDAs, by the way. This mapping stuff is new to everybody, and we appreciate all of you, all the providers. I want that to go on the record. we understand you're not being compensated for the efforts that you're making to give that information to us, and it's for the good of the state, and we thank you from the bottom of our hearts that this is moving forward like it is. And we just want to have every person in the state of Arizona have an opportunity to have broadband in their local environment.
In all our best interest. Thanks, everyone.